So, I've given you a little introduction, and I did want to start with a joke. So, there's a home builder who dies, and he gets to the pearly gates, and he encounters St. Peter. And St. Peter says, "Welcome, welcome, we've been expecting you. But I have to ask, there's a discrepancy with your age. My chart here says you're 162 years old. And I'm just thrilled to meet somebody that's lived to be 162. You're the oldest person I've ever encountered in the millennia that I've been serving in heaven." And the builder says, "Well, no, that's impossible. I'm only 68. But then St. Peter looks at his information and he says, "I've got your log sheet here from your change orders. With all the hours that you have put into change orders, you must be over 160 years old." There's a similar lawyer joke based on your billable hours. So, these are interesting times. These are real challenging times. And so I want to talk a little bit about what you guys who are in the field and you're encountering your customers and your suppliers and your subcontractors. And I want to talk to you about what you have experienced. And we want to hear from you on what your experience is. I want to hear some war stories, right? I want to hear people tell me about, what they have encountered in these challenging times. How have tariffs affected your life and your business? Let's just move that out of the way. You okay there?
Oh, great.
All right. The challenge in building and developing property in South Carolina is awful. I don't have to tell you that. Trying Greenville County, Anderson County, trying to conduct business in this region is very, very difficult. We don't have any land left. So land acquisition is very difficult. Financing is very difficult to get. Getting planning commissions to approve anything in these two counties at least is next to impossible.
Spartanburg is just as bad.
Now, I've heard Spartanburg is not as bad.
They're pretty bad. They're getting that way.
Well, yeah, I know, and I was talking to Councilman Lynch last night.
Right.
And he says there's just a lot of pressure now, a groundswell of pressure.
Move that way.
That's right. So, it's coming. And it's not just in this area, this region, or this state. It's all over the country. The NIMBYs have taken over. So, I do land use planning work as well. I represent developers in trying to get deals approved. It's very difficult. Moratoriums all over the place. The impact fees are coming. Greenville County School District authorized $60,000 this week for a study on impact fees. Supply chain tariff, labor, all that stuff. And, to make matters worse, you've got people that you're dealing with. If you're a home builder, you've got customers who are insane. And, so why are they insane? They're insane because they're entitled. They watch HGTV and they have unrealistic expectations about cost and about time. And they think that you, the builder, can just call up a whole army of subcontractors and suppliers, and they'll get everything delivered to you exactly when you want it, or when they want it, and when you need it. So it's an insane time to be trying to build houses. My goal here today is to kind of give y'all some tools that you can use to survive this environment, to thrive in the environment. And what we're going to talk about will be, turning what looks like chaos, that list of things that y'all are challenged by, is just, very chaotic. So how can we turn that around? And I'm here to tell you that, your contract is the most important thing. There's 2 contracts that are critical to your success. And you might think, well, owner-contractor agreement is the most important thing. And it's important, and it gives you the shield to protect yourself against a lot of those problems. But the most important contract is your subcontract at the end of the day. That's going to be your sword. And, unless you are hands-on building stuff, you've got to rely on your subcontractors. And so when you rely on your subcontractors, they better be able to stand up and stand behind it. So this is where it all starts, with the contracts. And, the contract really is the foundation, but it needs to reflect your business practices and what you value as a company. And I think, and judges think, it needs to be fair and even-handed. Because if your contract is viewed as being one-sided, it may be considered an adhesion contract if you say to your customer, this is my contract, I've used this for years, these are the terms, take it or leave it. It's called an adhesion contract. And judges don't like those because they're kind of presumed to be unfair. And most of the time they are. So you need to be able to explain what you're doing with your customer, explain these terms to your customer, and show him why you need this term, why you need indemnity terms, why you don't allow them to go whenever they want to on the job site, why you won't allow them to go into Wayfair and buy whatever they want to buy and bring it to the job site, and how you're not going to hire their brother-in-law to do the electrical work who you've never seen or met before. All those things are very important. We can't have it be unconscionable. Unconscionable is a term of art in the law, and that is a contract that no reasonable and informed person would sign. So, we're going to have a contract term that says, you're going to waive your right to a jury trial, you're going to arbitrate with me, but we're going to arbitrate and you're not entitled to any monetary damages from the builder. And that would be considered an unconscionable term, and a judge won't enforce it. So it's a balance. You're entitled to assert, the things that you need to conduct your business, but you're not entitled to trample over the rights of your customers. That's easy. And again, your contract should reflect your values. And I know that because you all are members of the Home Builders Association. You're coming from a place of professionalism. The people I know who are members of the HBA, who I represent, are essentially good people and they're interested in the industry, and they do not want to be viewed as being, you know, these horrible, unconscionable people. So it's all about fairness. So I've got a number of things here. I'm just going to run through these real fast. You want to arbitrate. You want to arbitrate, trust me. So you have to have a specific notice on page 1 of your contract. Your contract should be dated. I see them all the time. They're not dated. They should refer to all the design documents. There needs to be a schedule of the design documents. What are you supposed to build? And if you don't have all the design documents listed on page 1, page 2 of the contract, there's nothing in the record that shows exactly what you're engaged to do. And hey, it needs to be signed. Not only that, it probably ought to be initialed every page. So how many of you, when you have a contract with a customer, say to the customer, please initial every single page? Okay, that's great. It's good practice. Most people don't do that.
Then you can go back and say, did you read your contract?
Did you read your contract? And I see that you did, because you initialed it right here. So that gives me a whole bunch of deposition questions that I can ask this customer.
Something that I do in my contract.
Yes, sir.
I put some kind of verbiage in there. It's one line in one sentence in the contract, and I just pick one. And it could be something stupid like you owe me lunch at Chick-fil-A for the next 365 days. That's how I get my people to read their contract.
Yeah, that's good. Also, if it's a real important clause, like the arbitration clause in the owner contract, or the indemnity clause in the subcontract, get them to initial that paragraph. So that's a good thing. Your contract should be well scoped. So you've got a list of the design documents that you're supposed to follow. But in addition to that, I'm guessing you've got a proposal. I'm guessing you've got some specifications. I'm guessing you've got some selections that have already been made. So you're going to want to incorporate those into the contract, so you've got a record of exactly what you're supposed to do and what you're supposed to go put into the house. Allowances have to be dealt with. Everybody has a different way of dealing with allowances. There's lots of different ways you can do that. In fact, if you look at them, most fixed price contracts nowadays are just cost plus contracts anyway. There's so many allowances for every single thing. And part of that is the owner's fault. Well, the owners haven't selected everything. So how are you going to give them a fixed price? The warranty, very important. You want to try to exclude implied warranties. These are warranties that the law says attach to every new home contract. Implied warranty of habitability, implied warranty of workmanship. Those warranties, there's no statute that says what they are. There's no statute that says how long they last. There is no statute that says the scope of these warranties. So you want to try to exclude them. Nobody in South Carolina, no construction lawyer in South Carolina is sure that can be done. I'm not going to guarantee it can be done, but you should try. And certainly you could say, to the extent allowed by law, we are excluding these implied warranties. Do it in all caps, do it in bold, put it in red, whatever it takes to make it jump out at the page, and inform the customer, I'm providing you a limited warranty. This is what it is. It's repair or replacement. by the way. It's going to be repair or replacement. That's what you want to put in your express warranty. And not leave everything open to some interpretation by a judge or an arbitrator. So, express limited warranty with exclusions. You're not going to warrant the appliances longer than the appliance manufacturer did. So put that in your exclusions. And there needs to be a good punch list procedure. We do not want to get into the perpetual running punch list that goes on and on and on forever. Punch list procedure is very important. We're going to have a meeting. We're both going to fill out the punch list. That will be the punch list. We're not going to add anything to it afterward. This is it. So we're going to meet. We're going to talk about it. I'm even going to fix some things while I'm there, okay? But we're not going to have 18 different punch lists over 2 years. And I've seen that many, many times. Y'all have portals, y'all use Builder Trend, some of you, yeah? So put the portal in your contract. Hey, I use Builder Trend. This is what we're going to do. This is the official way we're going to communicate. These are the procedures we're going to use. You're going to log in. All the change orders will be there. We're going to have your change orders in Builder Trend. I'm going to put them in there. And if you don't respond in 10 days, we're going to assume that it's okay. And I'm going to do the work. And then, of course, you want to have some hold harmless language. You want to have your insurance terms in the contract. You're going to say, hey, I'm providing general liability coverage. I'm going to provide workers' comp. I'm going to make my subs do the same thing. And you're going to provide, or you're going to pay me to provide builder's risk. We'll talk about that soon, right? I have started to make sure that the customer understands he has to buy the flood insurance if it is required. Why is that? Well, if during construction there's a flood and my work is damaged, I need the flood insurance to take care of it. And then in the god-awful event that they hire, that your customer hires somebody to do the work and the customer pays them, then they're going to have to indemnify you for anything that happens because this brother-in-law does whatever work he does. Bunch of other things, wave subrogation, that's an insurance thing. It prevents litigation where there's an insurance claim and an insurance company pays something. You don't want the insurance company subrogating against you. So put that in there for your own protection. You want to waive consequential damages. I don't know of a construction contract that's at least well written that does not waive consequential damages because they're unlimited. If you are late and you are thereby in violation of the construction contract, the homeowner can say, well, I had increased carrying costs and I had additional living expenses and my house that I was selling didn't sell on time and so I lost $100,000 on that deal. That's a consequential damage. You don't want liability for that. So you waive them. And then include this limited warranty in the contract. Escalation clause, allowances, discounts and rebates. I actually had a huge issue in lawsuit with a customer of a client who said my client retained trade discounts and retained rebates, and that was just wrong. That was like immoral. It was the worst thing that he'd ever seen. So cover it. Just put it in your contract. Yeah, I'm going to keep the trade discounts for myself. Especially on a cost plus deal, you need to make sure that is understood. And these rebates, I don't know how that all works, but the rebates can be substantial if you're buying a lot of lumber from the lumber yard. So you want attorney's fees for the prevailing party. You want to be able to use pictures, use photos of the house in your portfolio. You want to be able to use this on social media. Now, you're not going to disclose where the house is, who your customer is. You're not going to show, have pictures of their family photos or any of that, but that can all be covered in the contract so that there's no misunderstanding that you can do that. Use of the design documents, that's also important. If you're the design builder, if you furnish the design documents, you sure as heck don't want them using your design documents for some other project or selling them or whatever. And then some time ago, there was, when the market was bad, that was a long time ago, there would be appraisal contingencies. And if the house, when you finished, didn't appraise, then the homeowner thought that they could get out of paying you the full contract price. Well, that's not right. There's no appraisal contingency in your contract. I have had experience, and you all have experienced these same people. The customer comes across just as the nicest person that you'll ever meet and as a really great person to do business with. And then you start building and they become Mr. Hyde, you know the type. So I've got some of my clients who want to contract to say, you have to behave civilly to me and my office people and my subcontractors. It's a shame people have to put that in their contract, but I think that's a good idea now. You're not going to...
Example of like how you write that in?
Sure. We will we'll have a provision in the contract that says that the builder and the customer will behave civilly toward one another and professionally, not have any profanity, not use anything, not say anything demeaning or critical of subcontractors. By the way, non-interference and non-competition with the subcontractors. You're not going to talk to my subcontractors.
Yeah.
So much less behave in a bad way to them.
Sure.
It's easy to do, and I think it highlights the need for this level of professionalism and treat people like business associates. Part of it is time and manner of communications. Put it in your contract if you don't want to be bothered on a Sunday. Period. Tell your customer, I'm open for business and contacts with you from 8 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock at night. Don't contact me outside of that. And I'm not open for business on Sunday. You people are entitled to your lives. And people don't respect that anymore nowadays. Everybody's on 24/7, 365. People do not like me to tell them, don't text message with your customers. it's really, as a litigator, it's a terrible thing. If you've ever had to if you've ever had to put together a thread of text messages, it's like making sausage. It's very, very difficult. You don't know what the date is. You don't know, how it all fits together. Things are taken out of context. Text messages are a very poor way to communicate in the business world. Y'all don't want to hear it because that's how you do things. But I'm just here to tell you, having a good contract clause that says text messages is not an appropriate means of business communication. We will communicate through email and through Builder Trend. That'll be the official record. So I kind of like that. I told you need to arbitrate, and you need to have an arbitration clause. You do not want to entrust the future of your business to 12 people. Greenville County's a good place to be, but there are other places in this state that are not so nice, and you don't want to entrust your business to 12 people off the street in one of these counties. So I say it's better to arbitrate. And there's pros and cons. Maybe it's quicker, maybe it's not. Arbitrations can get sideways too. It does give you some flexibility. It does limit the amount of discovery. It's all at the discretion of the arbitrator usually. And a positive and a negative is the cost and expense. The legal fees will be lower because the discovery, there are limits of discovery in arbitration that don't exist in litigation. And the expense, well, you got to pay the arbitrator. And of course, the counter to that is, well, heck, I can go to Judge Simmons, who's the master in equity in Greenville County, who's an excellent judge, has a lot of experience in construction matters. We can just take the dispute to him. And I won't have to pay somebody thousands of dollars to be the judge. But again, you're going to wait a while to get that result from Judge Simmons because his office is very, very busy. Arbitration is confidential. Things won't be filed in the court record that anybody can go online and look at. And that is a very, very big positive in the industry. It gives you some control. It's kind of informal. And by arbitrating, you get somebody who's going to decide the legal and the factual issues, somebody who has experience in the construction field. In my arbitration clause, I say, well, we're going to have an arbitrator, we're going to select an arbitrator who has at least 20 years of experience in construction law. And we have no problem getting somebody to fit that bill in this state. There's some specific things. I don't want to get into that. That's kind of dull. But let's talk about how you ask for arbitration. I mentioned a little while ago about unconscionable contracts. And we don't want to have an unconscionable contract, and you sure as heck don't want to have an arbitration clause that is unconscionable. And so in this case, this is a case I'm involved in. This case has gone on since 2014. I've been involved in this case since 2014. I've got a very, very minor player, I hope, in that case. But it has gone on and on, all the way to the United States Supreme Court and back. The builder's arbitration clause, bottom line, was unconscionable. This is Lennar. The contract failed to state that the validity of the arbitration clause was for the arbitrator to decide. The arbitrability of the dispute was instead for the court, the judge. And the judge, guess what, decided, oh, it's not arbitrable. And the Court of Appeals actually says it was. And then the Supreme Court said, no, it's not. And Lennar tried to appeal it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they denied a review. So you've got to say in your arbitration clause that arbitrability is for the arbitrator and not the court. And the real reason they got hung up was the homeowner wanted to join other people. And Lennar wanted to join other people, subcontractors, to the dispute. And they got hung up on sort of an inconsequential point. But the state Supreme Court decided, well, Lennar shouldn't have the sole right and authority to decide who's going to be in the dispute. And they wanted, the homeowner wanted to join the people they wanted to join because the plaintiff gets to sue whoever they want to sue. But no, Lennar's clause wouldn't allow that. So that's where they got hung up. And, you know, there's another case that said that the arbitration clause was not unconscionable. It was an even-handed, this is Great Southern's contract. It was deemed to be even-handed and fair and was not inconsistent. There was no internal inconsistency in the contract documents. So it was enforceable. Now I'm going to talk just a second about the risk of loss. Force majeure. That was big during COVID. And we all, in 2020, 2021, we all wanted to stand up and talk about force majeure and how this pandemic was such a thing. A force majeure is just an excuse for delay because it's nobody's fault. You know, there was such disruption in the labor force and in the supply chain that it was nobody's fault. One of those things just happened. If you had a force majeure clause in your contract, then you had some protection from that. And with of course, with the pandemic, we had people putting in escalation clauses. That became very important. And that is still very, very important. Escalation clause, you know how that works, right? You say, well, I'm assuming in my bid that the cost of lumber is X dollars per foot. If it goes more than 5% or 10% above that, then I'm going to be entitled to some relief. We were also worried in COVID about suspension, when the owner would say, I just don't know what's happening here. Why don't you stop work for a while? So suspension and termination. These are standard contract clauses. You should have those in your contract. And likewise, delay clauses. We are seeing more and more that owners want damages for delay. They want liquidated damages, particularly in the commercial area. In fact, I saw one the other day. I was reviewing for a subcontractor. This general contractor wanted liquidated damages and other delay damages that they might be able to prove. And I'm like, that's not how that works, people. So again, that's an unconscionable clause in my opinion. Force majeure clause, delays. So the AIA, does anybody here use the AIA family of documents? A101, 102, 201, that alphabet soup? No. it does a lot of things well. It doesn't do force majeure, but it does other things, and it can give you some relief, but not as well as some other types of contract forms. The A201, which is the general conditions of the contract, does provide an extension, some relief on the schedule for causes beyond the contractor's control. So, this clause might incentivize an owner to actually suspend or terminate the contract if there is no agreement on delay damages or an adjustment in time. So that's kind of a bad thing. Suspension and termination, all of the contracts should address that, and the action is if the owner suspends or terminates, and if the owner terminates for the owner's own convenience, then do you or don't you get overhead and profit on the remainder of the contract? And most of the time, no, you don't. So you're going to get, if the owner terminates for no reason, you're going to get what costs you have incurred or some proportional amount of your contract sum, but you're likely not going to be rewarded with overhead and profit on the non-performed work. On that point, notices are very important. How do you give notice? You should put that in your contract. And when do you give notice? And that's very important. Even the most obvious things that you should document. Oh, well, a tree hit the work. And so, of course, we have to fix it. But yeah, hang on a sec. You've been delayed. You're going to have extra costs. So you're going to have to give notice to the owner. You should give notice to the owner for that. And this happens all the time. You're dealing with the owner who cannot make a decision. The indecisive owner is the worst owner. He won't select. He won't decide. When you ask him a question, he doesn't give you an answer. And, when that happens, you've got to notify him, hey, I'm getting held up here. And when you get held up, what happens? Your costs go up. You're going to have home office overhead, and you're going to have extended overhead, and you're going to have these other costs that you need to be able to recover. So you've got to notify this owner, if I don't have a decision from you in 5 days, I'm going to have damages. And so you've got to make that decision. You've got to cure this as soon as possible. So this is what I really wanted to talk about, and that's the subcontract. And I say must be consistent with the prime, the owner-contractor agreement, pass-through clauses, flow-down provisions. So your subcontract's got to say, I've got a contract with this owner. I am adopting and incorporating in this subcontract every contract document, every term and condition in the owner agreement. Mr. Subcontractor, you are standing in my shoes for purposes of your scope of work. So there's no question who ultimately would have the responsibility for executing that scope of work but the subcontractor who's swinging the hammer. So you want to scope it very well. This is your scope. I'm not just relying on your 2-line proposal that says, I'm going to do the brick work. No, you're going to do the brick work according to these design documents, and you are stepping in my shoes as the general contractor to do all the brick work, all the masonry work that's required under the contract. Refer back to the contract documents with the owner. And golly, you want to have the same dispute resolution as you have with the owner. Meaning, if the owner somehow didn't sign an arbitration clause or said, I'm not going to agree to that, then you're going to have to, you obviously are not going to have an arbitration clause in your subcontract, because everybody there needs to be together in the same proceeding with the same finder of fact and judge. So you want to pass through the scope. Insurance. Say you've got a high value property here and the owner says, I need you to have $5 million in insurance coverage. Okay, I've got $5 million in insurance coverage, but then you go and contract with the framer who's only got 500. And so that doesn't work. You need to make sure that your sub is going to mirror the insurance provisions you agreed to. AI, not artificial intelligence. AI, additional insured coverage. You have got to be sure you're an additional insured on the sub's policy. Otherwise, you don't have any rights to pound on the carrier for the subcontractor to get him to step up and pay what it takes to settle a claim. So you've got to be an additional insured. And your owner contract probably says that you have to do that anyway. That is, the owner contract may say that the subcontractors will provide that the owner, the contractor, the architect, all those people are going to be additional insureds. And then on indemnity. And there's actually a lot to say about indemnity, and I'm not sure I really want to go through all that. But there are some recent cases. They all involve BFS. BFS's contract has been through the ringer in the South Carolina court system. BFS consistently loses their right to indemnity under the contract. It's called contractual indemnity, and they lose because their contracts have been held unconscionable, and they lose because there's a provision in South Carolina law called the anti-indemnity statute, which says in a construction contract, you may not contract with somebody to receive indemnity for your own negligence, where you're solely at fault. You can contract around it through clear and unequivocal language to get indemnity for your own concurrent negligence. And so there's some things that you can do to protect yourself in your subcontract. I've got about a page and a half in my updated subcontract that says how you're going to be indemnified. And one of those things is you have to carve out your personal responsibility as the builder for things that you do negligently that contributes to the loss. And you want to have a severance provision in your contract that says, hey, if the court says part of this contract violates the law, then the other parts of this contract can still be enforced. At the end of the day, don't be greedy. Be responsible. on the insurance, talking about AI, in the subcontract, don't put some specific forms that the sub has to provide you if you don't know what you're talking about. If you don't consult with your insurance broker about what forms are actually needed to be in the sub's insurance policy. So and this is going to segue pretty well with our friends here. You should be in a partnership with your broker, and you should feel like you're comfortable working with your broker. And I'm sure your broker should be open to answering questions, reviewing your contracts, and especially reviewing your subcontracts to make sure everything is in order. So this might be a good time to talk about insurance. How about that?
Great segue.
Now, I hear he's the comic relief.
That's what they tell me.
Go for it, man.
How are y'all doing?
Oh, I'm sorry, I gotta get you.
Good. I'll get it pulled up.
Yeah, I know where it is.
So guys, my name's Hunter Spivey. I'm with Southeastern Insurance Consultants. Charles is gonna help me. But what I would tell y'all is we're gonna give you a bird's eye view of some insurance. But what we'd really like is to have a conversation, because what you have for insurance is a contract between you and your carrier. And it all depends on your insurance company, what you have. And so it's a case-by-case basis with specific questions. So if y'all have any, we tell y'all, bring them on for us. While this is pulling up, I'm going to be talking about builder's risk insurance. So what builder's risk is basically it's coverage for your structure while it's being completed. So it's all the materials, fixtures, and everything in it until that completion date. So it's going to cover your wind and hail. If you're in the low country, it's gotten extremely expensive, as you know, but fire, vandalism, lightning. It's also going to cover materials in transit. So while things are being shipped to the job site, that's covered. You have soft cost, which is going to be your permitting fees, architectural fees, and then you can also carry profit and overhead in that coverage. Who should carry the builder's risk insurance? What we tell y'all is we always advise that the builder carries it. Because at the end of the day, if there's a claim, you're going to be the name on that check and you know exactly what you have. So you can have the homeowner pull the policy, but there's also a lot of exclusions. So State Farm, Allstate, Nationwide, a lot of the times while a home's under construction, that could be work that they're not covering. They might exclude materials being stolen, from the job site. So there's just a lot of subtle nuance to where if someone else is pulling it, you don't necessarily know what you have, if it's in force, and everything that goes along with it. And if you're added as an additional insured to a homeowner's policy, if there's a check written, they're gonna have their name first and you're gonna be second. So at the end of the day, they can hold that over your head. It can create an interesting dynamic to where you don't get your money back until they're ready to cash it, and they'll spread it out. But if you own the policy, it goes straight to you. And for having if you're gonna have the homeowner do it, you wanna be listed as the loss payee. So it's just like a mortgagee clause to where with an auto loan, if something happens to the vehicle, you're included. You wanna have that theft of building materials covered. A lot of the homeowners policies, they may have it, but it might be $5,000. And if you have appliances, you start looking at stuff, a lumber package, that's not gonna get you too far. And then again, going back to the profit and overhead, it's gonna cover all the soft costs to where there is a claim, you have the interest carrying over as you're waiting to work on it. Basically, you're gonna be reimbursed, and if you have a home that's right at the completion date, it burns down, you can actually get that profit that you were expecting from it to come back to you. And with that, Mr. Foster, he gets the liability, which is the fun part.
Thank you. We could do a whole class. We could do 2 hours on this, so I'm going to kind of go lightly over it. If you've got questions, I always tell my clients, please don't ever give me a set of building plans and ask me to do a takeoff, and I won't give you an insurance policy and ask you to translate it. And if you kind of keep those boundaries, you can get along pretty well. Before we get into it real quickly, I do want to say this is not an infomercial for Gallivan, White, and Boyd. It's not an infomercial for SIC. But make sure that you're dealing with somebody that knows what they're doing. I told Ron I was looking the other day, reviewing a subcontractor agreement, and somewhere down in there I saw the thing tenant, and I was like, so Googled it. Well, the guy's a real estate attorney. Just basically took a lease and kind of, molded it a little bit to adapt it to be a subcontractor agreement. Make sure you're dealing with someone that knows what they're doing. I doubt that you would, when you go to wire a house, go, well, the framework's pretty inexpensive. Can y'all do this? So make sure you're dealing with somebody that knows what they're doing. Long and short, general liability coverage covers bodily injury and property damage. Someone gets hurt on the job site, the damage, you've got resulting damage, roof fails. And I don't know why it's always over the master closet, but every leak we've ever had has been over the master closet. So you've got a wardrobe. Just basically, it's going to cover the resulting damage. It will not cover poor work. The work itself, Ron, that was Harleysville, LJ versus Bituminous. Yeah, LJ versus Bituminous, Harleysville with Crossman and Harleysville. Basically, in South Carolina, the poor work itself is not covered. It's also not prepaid legal insurance. If you and your homeowner get into a dispute, you've got to have the bodily injury or property damage to trigger coverage. Sadly, I had a client call this week. They built a home in Prosperity, and the homeowner had some issues with it, had an engineer come out. They took off pieces of siding and found that about every third nail missed the framing, missed the studs. They looked at the roof and found that the nails had been driven too deep into the shingle, so that voided the manufacturer's warranty. Long and short, they're going to have to basically peel the house down to the skin and start over. They also found the floors inside on the slab were not level. Our builder's unfortunately in a bad spot, but there's no bodily injury, no property damage to trigger the liability. So this is one they're going to have to go back, lean on the subcontractors, lean on the subcontract agreement and the indemnification.
They should have waited till the house leaks.
Very good point. Any questions on what the general liability is? And I don't mean to insult your intelligence if I am. When you get into the liability, again, read your policy. There are some significant exclusions and limitations. One particularly, CG 2294, basically exclusion L said damage to your work caused by your work is not covered, and it used to have a give back called unless provided or performed by a subcontractor. This exclusion takes out and simply says damage to your work caused by your work is not covered. It removes the subcontractor give back. So basically, if you've got this on your policy, you have a premises policy. It's great if anybody gets hurt while you're on the premises.
You would hope that people aren't buying policies without exclusion.
You would hope. Again, had a client up here in Greenville that we picked up, and they had this on their policy, and their old agent said, no, that's not what it does. This is just about the premium. They just want you to have insured subcontractors. And I was like, literally, it says exclusion, damage to work performed by subcontractors. I was like, I don't know how to make it any clearer for him. But there again goes back to dealing with someone, this is what they do for a living. There are others, if you do condos, townhomes, make sure that you've got a clear understanding. If you build duplexes or threeplexes, make certain that your insurance carrier verifies that they don't consider that to be a townhome. We've seen that come up. Prior work exclusions, you need to watch out for. Some policies will come in and say, hey, we'll take everything, but not anything before us. South Carolina is a continuous trigger state. We've got an 8-year statute. Basically, each carrier that was involved on that house, if it goes back 8 years and you had 3 carriers or 4 carriers, we'll do 4 so I can do the math, then each would have their 2 years. So make sure that you've got, do not have the prior work exclusion. Classification limitation, is basically saying that if they've got you for superintendent and subcontractor work, but no carpentry anywhere on there, you bring somebody on to do some carpentry work, some warranty work. If the classification's not there, it's not covered. Continuous and progressive damage exclusion. This goes back to the 8-year trigger. This again is going to give you, like this particular one, basically the date, any work done before February 10th of 2023, anything completed prior to that, they won't cover. Hopefully you don't have this. Most of these are getting into more of the excess carriers. There are standard carriers in the state, which you'll see basically your premium, and it stops there. If you see taxes and fees, that means you're dealing with a carrier not licensed to do business in the state. And if you see taxes and fees on your general liability, you're probably best to just go on and throw that in the trash, because you'll probably be paying most of it out of pocket. Ron's favorite, the original AI. The contract for the subcontractor, an insurance policy is a contract. And we're going to stop because that's about the extent of my legal knowledge. But the insurance contract, your general liability, is a contract between you and your insurance carrier. The subcontractors is the same way. If you are listed as an additional insured, you are now a party to that subcontractor's agreement. If you have the fallout where you and the subcontractor are no longer communicating, no longer talking, it happens, you have a claim 2 years later, you don't need his permission to file a claim. Without the additional insured, you would have to get his authority and his permission to file a claim on his liability. So that's the most important. And as Ron said, I love when you see people that have copied a contract and it's got additional insured form CG 2010, CG 2037. There are so many different forms. Like Ron said, do not put something in your contract that you're not going to follow. If you don't know what those forms are, have additional insured, including completed operations, send it to your agent. Have your agent review and tell you, yes, this meets the contract conditions, or no, it doesn't. And make sure that way you're properly protected. We will email you these presentations so that you'll have them. If you've got questions, Ron's contact information is there. Mine and Hunter's is on ours. We appreciate you being here. Appreciate you being at the convention. And see you this afternoon.